Contentment is good. Discontentment is bad. Who has heard this or felt this way? I have. In the dictionary, the definition of discontent is dissatisfaction, lack of contentment. Well, I'm here to tell you that this definition is wrong, or at least incomplete. When I was a child, no one would let me say that I was discontent with my father because, and I quote, "He is your father." Well, I knew, but at the time, I wished I had another one. I could not be discontent with my father, a father that spent the days away from home, doing who knows what, didn't have a job, always came home high, and most of the time broke everything on his path and hurt everyone. And then people would say, "Okay, but at least you have a loving mother." A mother I loved, and that was sick. I was not discontent with her. I was discontent with the doctors, who said that they could not do anything, that it was too risky to operate, that trying to remove a malformation in that part of the brain could leave too many scars. What I mean is that I've always felt discontent in some way, and I know I'm not alone. This happiness report shows that the percentage of people reporting negative feelings is increasing. Several news tell us about our discontent. To prove my point, I've interviewed 198 people through an anonymous survey, and they all said that they have felt discontent at some point in their lives. But the truth is, from a young age, we are taught that contentment is a noble characteristic and discontentment is bad. Actually, when I asked these people to classify contentment and discontentment as positive or negative, 61% classified discontentment as negative. And, more surprisingly for me, 84% classified contentment as positive. I don't feel this way. I've always felt that trying to accept something we are dissatisfied about is wrong, and that we usually tend to confuse contentment with comfort. Fatima is the perfect example of someone who was always content with her situation. Once, when she was 7 months pregnant, her husband gave her a beating that left her in a bed for weeks. But she never left, because at least she had a house, she had her belongings, she had someone. Fatima was my mother. Contentment in her life brought her nothing but pain, and yet she would completely agree that contentment is good and discontentment is bad. I have a master's in pharmaceutical sciences. I studied pharmacy because I wanted to find a cure for my mother, and the fuel that kept me going through 9 more years of studying than my fellow colleagues or my family was discontent. I was discontent with the conditions that people around me were living on. I was discontent with the fact that having an education was deemed as a privilege. My mother passed away at the beginning of my 5th year of college, and I suddenly lost all of my motivation. Because of that, I realized that, after all, this was not the profession I wanted to pursue, but I thought it was too late. When I entered the job market and I had my first job at a pharmacy, I felt like it was the end, that I was doomed. I was unhappy, but so comfortable with the fact that I no longer had to split myself into 5 to pay my expenses, that I started getting that fake feeling of contentment. But it didn't last long. I really couldn't make that feeling of discontent go away, so I took action. I got a new job, and I decided to start an escape game business. This discontent made me realize that just because I'm a pharmacist, it doesn't mean there cannot be other things. This year, I decided that I'll be many other things. I'll be a poet, I'll be an actress, I'll be an entrepreneur, I'll be a public speaker. So, for me, this sentence is a little bit different. Contentment is good. Discontentment is necessary. And while I was researching, I found out that many personalities in history shared the same opinion. For instance, Thomas Edison wrote, "Restlessness is discontent, and discontent is the first necessity of progress." And Oscar Wilde said that discontent is the first step in the progress of a man or a nation. For them, discontent is not seen as negative. On the contrary, it is a powerful catalyst for positive change. At the heart of the motivation for change is always the message that we cannot stay here, that we cannot become the best version of ourselves, remaining who we are and where we are now. Discontent tells us there is something more. So, why do we allow so often contentment to evolve into comfort? It is because to change demands a lot of work. But we can use discontent as the force we need to move forward. Our growth as individuals, as well as a society, is generally motivated by discontent. This is what fuels our learnings, our experiences, and our changes. One thing that reinforces what I'm saying is that positive change in the world stems from discontent. Strikes, revolutions, they brought us rights, they brought us justice, they brought us freedom. Imagine life before the French Revolution, without the values of equality, freedom, and fraternity, or life in Portugal before the 25th of April. History tells us that we need to change our perspective of discontent to something more positive and act upon it. That is the first step towards a better future. We need to stop thinking about discontent as a negative feeling that we should repress and start thinking about it as a bell that rings when something needs to be changed. When I asked those people what they did when they felt discontent, 66%, more than half, said that they would either ignore it or distract themselves with something else. That was basically the same amount that said that they still feel discontent. Because if you choose to repress your discontent, it won't go away. You have control, and you can choose to listen to it, direct it at the right subjects, and change your life. So, if I've convinced you by now that discontent can actually be useful, you must be thinking, okay, but how can I use it? So I present you the change stairs. You must climb them, but one step at a time. Step 1 is to analyze the cause of your discontent. One of the key things is to learn how to separate what you can change from what you cannot. For instance, you cannot change people. For so long, I was so mad at my father for him just being who he is. I'm not saying that he was right, but I couldn't change him. He was the only person who could change himself, but he wouldn't. So I was not directing my discontent towards the right things. I could not change him, but I had a route of action for solving this feeling. And that was to create emotional distance from him, and actually from toxic people altogether. So, step 2, act as a detective. Be curious. Investigate that feeling of discontent and realize what is making you feel that way. Maybe a boss, your job, your love life, some friendship. You can take control and implement changes. That is the trick, to grow, to change from it. So, step 3 is to identify what is stopping you from changing. Is it fear of the unknown? Is it the dread of not being capable? Do you feel comfortable? But remember, 85% of what we worry about never happens. What if you choose to focus on everything that can be much better on the other side? What if I told you that you have all the tools you need? To overcome your fears, try this exercise. Close your eyes. And if you ever use discontent to change something in your life, try to retrace what person you'd be and what you'd be doing right now if you didn't. For me, if it wasn't for my discontent, I'd probably be a 14-year-old dropout, married to someone I don't love just to get out of home, having to work on a job I didn't like. I cannot imagine my life like that. So I am very thankful for my discontent. So at last, take action. Change your life. Maybe you cannot change your discontentment source right away, but you can start improving somehow. Start with the small things, but just start. So here you have all of the steps. And now you might be thinking, okay, I changed my mind, so my path through those stairs will be something like this? Well, no. It will probably be something like this. It won't be linear. Some days you might feel like you made no progress, or that you even took some steps back. But it's the overall that counts. Because it won't happen overnight. It won't be easy. It will take a lot of work and effort. It might hurt sometimes. Keep this in mind during your process. It is difficult, but it is all worth it in the end. So now, take control, listen to your discontent, discover what causes it, and dare yourself to take the leap and change that, one step at a time. And lastly, ignore that definition of the dictionary and use this definition of discontentment instead. Force capable of driving new ideas, destroying oppression, implementing new ideals, and changing lives. Thank you.